In the middle of the worldwide outbreak of coronavirus, the U.S. government today set the stage for a new ailment, whiplash. That's what you get when the top White House economic advisor tells everyone the United States has definitely, totally contained the virus, in his words, almost airtight, while simultaneously the actual public health experts at the CDC were telling the United States of America at that moment that they expect the virus to spread. And they're warning that the disruption to everyday life might be severe when the U.S. takes public health measures to try to combat that spread. However, those contradictory messages landed at your house. On Wall Street, they went through a second straight day of huge losses. Is the stock market diving because of concerns about the way our government is handling this crisis? Is the stock market diving just because of the crisis itself, regardless of how well our government is handling or not handling its role in trying to stop it? Or is this one of those stories where we should be wary of Wall Street noise crossing over into front page news? Is this one of those Wall Street freakouts that ought to rattle the rest of us and wake us up? Or is this something that should be seen as a business story? Joining us now is the great Stephanie Wolf, senior business correspondent for NBC News, host of her own show here on MSNBC, weekdays at 9 a.m. Steph, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I go to you when I don't know whether a business page story should be a front page story. Is this one that should be?
This one is absolutely one that should be. So, yes, you can look at the stock market and say, my goodness, $1.7 trillion in losses. That's not the big news, because guess what? The market could come back tomorrow. The big news is about information and risk management. Whether you are a Fortune 500 CEO, whether you own a small lumber yard, or whether you're a mom, having trusted information is how you succeed. And right now, the information is coming from the Chinese government, not a trusted source, and the United States government, which, as you pointed out over the last few minutes, is clearly not a trusted source. So if you run any sort of business or you're an investor, how can you make an educated decision about what lies ahead when you're getting information like this?
So it's not necessarily, in terms of we all try to divine what the market is saying and why investors are doing what they're doing. But you're saying this is not necessarily a judgment by investors that the U.S. government is mishandling this. It's just a judgment that the U.S. government can't be trusted to provide adequate information around which people can plan.
Correct. You know what the market loves? Certainty. The market just doesn't love a bull market or a bear market. They love to understand information. Remember, why do investors get in the most amount of trouble? Insider information, too much information. What they want is trusted information. So when Larry Kudlow walks out and says, this thing is nearly airtight, and investors who love this president know they can't trust that, when you've got representatives from the CDC saying it's not if, it's when, we know that only 4 states even have the test for the coronavirus. So how can you possibly say we've got this thing almost airtight? If you're any sort of investor or business owner, you're not saying, oh my gosh, I'm going to run for the hills and move into a cabin. But at the very least, you're going to say, I'm going to take my chips off the table until I know what the game really is.
If that's the dynamic that's at work here, I talked a little bit. I'm uncomfortable sort of talking about this because I don't want to feel like I'm taking sort of personal shots at the president. But I do think it's fair to say that when he says stuff, either on Twitter or out loud, there is not a deep and broad expectation that what he's saying is true. I think that it's baked in. People expect him to say things that aren't true. And I'm sorry, because he's the president of the United States. And they expect him to say things that are transparently self-serving, that are designed to accomplish something for him, even if they don't reflect real information for the American people. So given that that's what we all get, we're all smart. We know how he operates. When he says, stock market's looking good to me, coronavirus is totally under control, he keeps saying pro-stock market things as if he's trying to turn around the market's view on that. How does that play when everybody knows that he's not telling the truth?
Because we know the president is reliant and enthusiastic about having a strong market. You remember it was 2 days before the midterms. He came out and said, getting really close on a middle-class tax cut when Congress wasn't even in session. Within hours, Larry Kudlow was out there saying, oh, maybe that's not the case. People are accustomed to the president doing this. But what's scary right now is the human toll, that this is a real risk. This isn't just a little bit of cute financial engineering and you can tax cut your way out of it, or you could pressure the Fed into cutting rates. This is a real issue that could be a pandemic, that could be an epidemic, and they're playing a dangerous political game.